Mr Albanese, Kristina Keneally, and all the Labour Party who are present here. I also want to thank the community. When we asked them what issues do you have, we were inundated with questions. I hope we'll be able to cover many of them today, perhaps not all of them. These questions we are asking to all political parties, but Labour is the first one which is responding to us. Thank you for that. Our first question is, how will the Labour Party support the Indian community to make sure we have appropriate religious and cultural aged care?
Well, thanks very much for the question. As you know, aged care has been a major issue, and it's a big difference at this election. We've had a Royal Commission that found that in its title of one word, it found neglect in aged care. And one of the things that I know and admire about your community is the respect that you have for your elders. It's a defining characteristic, and it's very common amongst, I've got to say, all of the ethnic communities. One of the things also that happens to people in their later years as well is that they want to very much cherish the culture of their birth. So it's particularly important that we have for the culturally and linguistically diverse community appropriate aged care facilities. And we, in our plan for aged care that I announced as part of the major budget reply that I made this year, we will address these issues consistent with the findings of the Royal Commission report. It is imperative that we allow and indeed cherish our older members of the community to live with dignity and respect in their elder years. And what that means, as well as making sure that food, language, practices are culturally sensitive, which is why it is so important that we do that. We're absolutely committed to it. We've done a lot of work with the communities. Andrew Giles is here, has taken some responsibility there working with Kristina.
Thank you very much. Our second question is with respect to India. Would you continue to support and further enhance free trade agreement with India? How will you ensure India is a trading partner of choice with Australia?
We certainly would continue to support the comprehensive economic dialogue agreement which is there between Australia and India. We think that it isn't comprehensive enough in part. The Barghese report back in 2018 provided a blueprint for strengthening the relationship. And what we would do in government is to update the Barghese report to make sure that we really strengthen those economic ties. We've said that there should be an Indian-Australian economic dialogue meeting each and every year. And we also would support India's participation in APEC, and if India chose to apply to RCEP as well, we would support that very much. We see the relationship between Australia and India as only being one that strengthens both of our economies going forward. And I see, as I think I said before in my speech, the diaspora here as being a key advantage that we have over other countries.
next is a very important issue for us. Indian families across Australia want to make sure we can keep our culture strong for the next generation. How will the Labour Party support Indian language and culture and maybe religious schools?
We think this is very important, and the Indian language and culture, one of the strengths that we have here in multicultural Australia is the dancing and the welcome that we just saw, is that the youth learn the culture of their parents is passed down. That's very important that people participate in Australian culture, but also that doesn't mean forgetting the culture of their parents, even if they were born here. And that's something that the Indian community has been very good at, but it needs more support to do so. We'll have grants of $30,000 for community language schools to make sure that they can conduct their work. But the other thing that has been raised with us and we've adopted is increasing access to younger people. The younger someone starts a language, the better it will be for them. It's just easier to take up. So we think even in terms of younger than school age should be able to access those community language schools and to be given support for it. The truth is that the community language schools are one of the most economically beneficial contributions, because, as you all know, whilst there are some paid staff, it ends up being volunteers in the community literally conducts it. And the benefit of having people with language across the board is so important. It's an asset for them as individuals. But I make this point as well, it's an asset for Australia to have people who have language skills, particularly language skills that can then be used to deepen the relationships and ties.
The next question, it pertains to Hindus outside India. Labour raised the issue of Hindu persecution in Bangladesh last year. What will Labour's refugee policy look like?
We did raise this last year through Penny Wong making representations in October last year. We'll continue to raise it, and I know that it's an issue that Kristina has raised and has, I think more than anyone else in the Parliament, has raised issues of the rise of extremism, persecution, the need to have an ambassador for human rights is something that we have said we will have as well. But Kristina?
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge as well Michelle Rowland, Chris Bowen, Sally Situ, Andrew Giles and Andrew Charlton. We've all been engaged with the Hindu Council in terms of the concerns being raised about the persecution of Hindus in Bangladesh, and held a few roundtables last year. And Anthony's right, Senator Wong has raised this, I have raised this with the government. I think the question about the refugee intake is an important one here, because what is important about our refugee intake is that it remains non-discriminatory. That is, it seeks to support and protect those who are most in need, those who are most in danger. And I think that's an important aspect of Australia's refugee program, and going forward it has to seek to understand the emerging and growing threats that people, and particularly where people have strong links to Australia, where communities have strong links to Australia. We've seen the Australian response to Afghanistan. The government has recently announced an additional intake of 16,500 for Afghanistan, and we support that. But this government has in fact cut the humanitarian intake and has not provided a plan post-COVID with the borders reopening to do that. Now, right now, that is not something from opposition we can design in full, given that the borders are not fully reopened. And we will need to also work with settlement services, which have been quite significantly impacted by the border closures and the cuts to their funding. But going forward, it is important that our refugee intake not only rests with government, but with the community. And one of the things that I, as the Shadow Minister for Immigration, am very keen to see us do in government is introduce a community sponsorship program that provides for additional numbers that would allow for diaspora communities, faith communities, civic communities, families, and even businesses to support refugees who are most in need to be able to receive protection, to be able to do it by increasing our intake without adding additional cost to the taxpayer, but particularly that allows for diaspora communities and family communities to be able to do what I believe Australians want to do. I believe Australians are generous. I believe they are welcoming. And I believe if given the chance, they will seek to put out their hand of friendship and to put out their hand of support to welcome refugees to Australia. Canada does this exceptionally well. Other places in the world do it exceptionally well, and I believe that Australians, given the opportunity to do so, like the nods of yeses I see in the room right now, indicates that we can have a similar community sponsorship program in Australia.
Thank you very much. Bangladesh was just one example. There is a lot of prosecution going around. Our next question is, I think, dear to your heart, Mr. Albanese. You just mentioned, do you support a less expensive and easy process for parent visa and migration? Anecdotal evidence suggests that having parents at home empowers new mothers as they can continue to work, save government on childcare subsidies, and increase workplace productivity.
Well, it certainly does, and parents are so important, which is why we need to really address the issue of something that isn't spoken about, it's not on the front page of papers. But the backlog in this government's delays of visa applications, whether it be partners, parents, the sponsored visits, it is just extraordinary. It's blown out even for, I think it is now for 54,000 partners are on the queue to be dealt with. These are people wanting to join their life partner here in Australia. That is absurd. The blowout in citizenship at a time in which we say as a nation we want people to become Australian citizens who are here. We want people to fully participate in elections and in processes here as Australian citizens, whilst continuing to celebrate the cultures of their birth, has blown out to some 30 months for 90%. 30 months. That's absurd that delay is there. That's a term of Parliament and stopping people participating in that process. Previously it was only 6 months. I know that Kristina is very keen on this issue, and I'm sure that she'll want to add something here as well.
I very much would. Thank you, Anthony. And again, I want to acknowledge a number of my colleagues in the room. We've held a range of roundtable online during COVID, particularly meetings with the Indian community as well as other diaspora communities who are really frustrated by the government's delay on parent visas. And can I say, as a migrant myself, who raised 2 children while my parents were in the United States, I felt the loss of an opportunity that so many Australians are able to take up, which is that you can invite your parents, your children's grandparents, to be part of their lives. They can help with the after-school care. They can be there on the weekend. They can teach them the family histories and stories and culture. I have missed that. And I know that there are so many people in the room who have missed that. And the reality is that this government's backlog of parent visas, of partner visas, of citizenship applications, of skilled visas, of humanitarian visas means that when we come to government, if we come to government, we will inherit a clogged visa processing system. So the first thing we need to do is clear those backlogs. And I imagine it's going to take more than just a business as usual approach. Something we announced recently, lifting the cap on the Australian public sector, is really important because that cap has artificially limited the capacity of public sector, particularly in the Department of Home Affairs. But secondly, because of these consultations that we've done, we understand that there are many people who've paid, in some cases, $50,000 in fees for visas they may never actually receive. Because of the backlogs, because of the clogged system, people are literally waiting for years before they get news on their visa. That is simply not good enough. Now, I can't design a whole visa system from opposition, but what I can tell you is because of the work that you have done with us as a community, we understand what the problems are, and we've got some ideas on how to fix them. Because I don't want Australian children to miss the opportunity to know their grandparents, to know their families, and for you as parents to have the opportunity to have the support that every other Australian family often enjoys, which is to have your grandparents as part of your family life. So we will take that knowledge that you've given us, we will take that insight, and we will put it to work in what I imagine will be a very focused piece of effort. If I can just say this, Anthony mentioned some of those statistics there. I'm a big believer in government that what gets measured gets done. And when we were last in government, we processed 90% of partner visas within 12 months. The government now does it in about 36. When we were last in government, we processed citizenship applications in 6 months. This Liberal government takes some cases 18 to 24 months just to process a citizenship application of somebody who's already living in the country. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. We have a multicultural country, and the public service in this country, and the government in this country, and particularly the Department of Home Affairs in this country, needs to service that multicultural community. And our commitment to you is that it will. And that's why I say to you, it's really important to change this government.
Thank you very much for that support. Now, do we have time for one more question, or can we take two?
I think you're in charge.
Oh yes, but are very strict directions that you have to leave by 7:30.
That's okay.
Yes. Okay, the next question is a bit difficult. Is there a Labour and Green parties deal? What is your stand on political parties who spread Hindu phobia with false claims, as Mr. Shoebridge did and other Green MPs who have been doing it from time to time? What actions would you take to stop it? Will your how to vote card suggest that preference vote be given to Greens party? Sorry for it being so long.
No. We are the only party, and I'm the only candidate for Prime Minister who's wanting to form government in my own right. We will not do deals. We will not do deals with the Greens. We will stand on our own, and that stands in very stark contrast with, there's this coalition agreement between Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce. They don't like each other, but there is an agreement that keeps the coalition together, but it's secret. It's secret. They resist any attempt to get access to it, and that's not the way that a democracy should function. We are standing in our own right here, and if we see people like Sally there, elected as a member for Reid, And Jerome Laxale, elected as the member for Bennelong, for example, in 2 neighbouring seats to the electorate here of Parramatta, as well as our Labor members returned. We will be very, very close if we can deliver in this region, those 2 electorates.
Swastika for Hindus is a sacred symbol. Hindus are misunderstood to be Nazi supporters when they display their sacred swastika, which is a symbol of peace and prosperity. What will Labour do to address this?
Yeah, I'm conscious, Kristina will contribute to this as well, but I'm conscious that for Hindus, for Buddhists, for Jains, it has a very different meaning from what people who aren't aware, who aren't educated about the origins and the meaning, the peaceful meaning of that symbol is for your religion. And that is why we need to carve out, make sure that it's respected when used by your communities, as it has been for a very, very, very long period of time. Kristina.
Thank you, Anthony. I would agree with your statement there. In the Parliament, the Australian Labor Party has really led the conversation about the rise of right-wing extremism and ideologically motivated extremism, which unfortunately we now know accounts for 50%, half of ASIO's priority counterterrorism caseload. But I don't think I need to tell people in the room that that's the reality. Because what you know, what we know, sadly, is we have seen a rise in racism. We have seen an increase in hate-filled commentary online and in the broader community. And COVID did play a part in that, as have voices both internally in Australia and overseas. So we called for an inquiry in the Intelligence and Security Committee into extremism, particularly concerned to determine if Australia had the right laws and policies and approaches when it came to combating what ASIO now tells us is a terrorist threat in Australia. One of the recommendations that the Australian Federal Police brought forward was to outlaw certain hate symbols and certain hate literature. They said it would make it easier for them to disrupt radicalisation, and I take that advice very seriously. In many ways, I welcome the measures taken by state governments in New South Wales and in Victoria to ban certain symbols, including the swastika. But I think what is important is that in those state measures and those state approaches, there has been a carve-out. A carve-out recognizing for Buddhist and Hindu and Jain communities that the swastika means something different, that it is a symbol of peace. I think this is also an important moment where we have a conversation with the Australian community, not just about the rise of right-wing extremism and how we keep ourselves safe as a strong, united, multicultural community. Because what do the extremists want to do? They want to undermine democracy, they want to divide us from one another. But we also have the opportunity to have a conversation about what that symbol means for your communities and how it should be most appropriately understood and respected in Australia, and where it does serve as a symbol of hate that we as Australians reject it, but where it serves as a symbol of peace, we embrace it.
Thank you very much. I'll ask all of you to please remain on your tables and ask Mr. Sai Paravastu to come and take Mr. Albanese around to each of your tables. Thank you.
Fiji Times. Be with the times.